The two Fae courts, the Seelie and Unseelie, are a fairly clear distinction. On one side, you've got the merry, sometimes helpful Fae who cavort with humans and might even warn you if you're about to break one of their rules. On the other side are those kind of more elemental forces of chaos who are mean, capricious, and often actively malicious. This distinction is broadly fine. The Seelie and Unseelie are rooted in the Scots language and Gaelic folklore. And they also reflect other folklore traditions. The good and the bad Fae are reflected in Germanic and Norse dark and light elves, for instance. At the end of the day, we like to categorise our goblins, our Fae, our elves, these fantastical creatures. And this need to categorise takes us all the way into Victorian children's literature. This is where we start to see fairies separated into seasonal courts for spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Yes, originally there were 4 Fae courts, one for each season of Victorian Britain. Following all of this, many modern depictions have since conflated the Seelie and Unseelie with usually a summer and winter court distinction. And after that, they call it a day. Dungeons & Dragons is a prime example of this, but there are many others. But this makes no sense to me. Not because summer isn't a warmer, generally merrier time of year, and winter more cold, more harsh, and more averse to life. And not because autumn and spring are, in many of these modern presentations, nowhere to be found. My real issue is that spring, summer, autumn, and winter aren't the seasons. At least for around 50% of this world. In fact, about half of the surface of this planet experiences not 4 seasons, but 2. Which makes me wonder, if we've got the Seelie and the Unseelie, why are we shoehorning that concept on to a 4-season model that doesn't really seem to fit it, when there is a 2-season model used by half of the world that might? And also, what's the point of having a Fae court system that doesn't map onto the majority of the real world? So with that said, sticking with a 4-season model for our Fae courts doesn't make a ton of sense, especially when there is a perfectly adequate 2-season model that a lot of people around the world are very familiar with. And especially when fantasy worlds are filled with the exact sort of biomes and territories that actually would very much have a 2-season situation rather than a 4-season one. Fantasy worlds generally don't universally reflect a temperate sort of European climate. So today we're going to remodel the Fae court system into a 2-court system that actually makes sense for Arctic, Mediterranean, tropical, and desert regions. Allow me to introduce to you the wet and dry courts. Yeah, we're going to need a better name than that. The Court of Storms and the Court of Droughts is what I've gone for. I'm sure there's better names out there, but this is an attempt to redress that temperate-centric mindset that our Fae courts have historically been designed with. Equatorial, tropical, and even Mediterranean climates don't really reflect that traditional spring, summer, autumn, winter model, and more do realistically feel a rainy and a dry season. If we're going to be mapping over a sense of Seelie and Unseelie, we need to get a sense of the associations that come along with rainy season and dry season. What I like about the concept of a court of storms and droughts is the fact that both of them are quite horrible. For me, the Fae should be wild, untamed, dangerous, and filled with risk, rather than having an entire court of pleasantries and cupcakes. I'm also not a massive fan of a moral binary in my Fae folk. The Seelie Unseelie feels a bit hollow to me because it's not quite that simple. All fairies are fairly capricious and mercurial. They're not going to be either good or bad all of the time. The Fae are also a force of will and nature, and how better to demonstrate that than to tie them to 2 massively destructive forces of the climate. So how would we go about world building a functional and diverse Fae realm dominated by the courts of storms and droughts? First, we'll make use of some of the kind of traditional associations we have with storms and droughts as chief courtiers to set the tone of these courts. blizzards, thunderstorms, deluges, hurricanes and tornadoes. Just to name a few, these give off impeccable vibes of hot-headed and mercurial Fae lords. For the Court of Droughts, we're a bit limited here because there's not that many recognisable forms of drought. So what I propose is we look at the causes or effects of drought instead. Things like wildfire, blight and famine. All of these dangerous and powerful and elemental Fae forces should be contrasted with the fact that it is necessary for life to have both sun and rain to live. And you've got two complex courts. Still with that Fae danger, but also some of the positive associations as well of new growth and new life in both cases. Although I would say the more villainous of the two would probably be our Court of Droughts. See, storms can be dangerous and destructive, but they also represent an unpredictability and a liveliness that is not so present in the associations around drought. See, drought feels insidious, inevitable, slow creeping and cruel. This does fit to some extent with the cold, calculating personage of the Queen of Air and Darkness, for instance, from the traditional Unseelie court. While flipping the script a little bit towards the tyranny of heat and endless toil and leaching of moisture out of the land. Although I will say the driest desert in the world is Antarctica, which flips the script just that little bit to keep it interesting. The very concepts of storms and aridity generally are just so universal and potent that they can adapt actually to a lot of climates very well indeed. We can see vignettes of blizzard-calling naiads of the Court of Storms being trapped and locked under the water by the rampant frost and ice conjured by Jack Frost of the Court of Drought. Or a storm pixie flying squad battling a rampaging wildfire spirit by surrounding it in a blizzard of petals. So we have our celebrant, passionate, dynamic and unpredictable Court of Storms, and our cruel, oppressive, greedy and tyrannical Court of Droughts. But how does splitting Fairyland this way serve telling a story better than splitting it down the Unseelie and Seelie line? Because I hope I've already demonstrated why that summer-winter split doesn't really work conceptually, at least beyond the temperate parts of the world. How does it really look to get away from the moral binary of Fae kingdoms? Because what we really don't want to do is get rid of the joyous and merry parts of the Feywild, the pixie tea parties or merry bands of drunken satyrs. Joyous, celebrant Fae, carefree, in favour of a very modern, moral, grey sludge. That's not any better, and frankly, it's probably overdone. Why I think that the Storms and Drought courts work for the Fae is that not only are the concepts of a rainy and a dry season broad enough to accommodate all types of Fae behaviour within each, but that it better represents the nature of the Fae than that Seelie and Unseelie. Not with moral relativity, but with an acknowledgement of the changeable capriciousness of nature, on which Fae really are. They are representatives of that chaos that happens when power is given over to the beyond natural. To really sell you on this, what I want to do now is go through some of those classic Fae scenarios and show you both sides of the divide, to demonstrate that although the Court of Droughts may be more stuck in its ways and more traditionally evil, that many of its motivations line up with traditional Fae values. And likewise, that the Court of Storms, in its fluid excitement of changeable, thundering partying, it also holds some of those classic values that we would expect from the Fae, splitting the Seelie and Unseelie court from a good and evil into a binary that is more complex and more needs driven. based on the needs of the actual natural spirits or supernatural spirits that these Fae are. So, a Fae party swoops across the mortal realm, entrancing mortals to dance with them for just one evening until they return, drained and weary, to a world that they no longer associate with or recognise. Storm Fae might believe that to dance with the storm is the true fulfilment of life. That excess and wind and lightning and passion is the only true way to live, and might therefore try to love bomb and distract their guests long enough that they lose themselves in the Fae time and emerge at the very end of their life having spent it all in the party, in the eye of the storm, in that central, joyous, bright, shining moment, to return to the mortal realm having lived. But in the Court of Storm's minds, this is freeing them from the drudgery of a mortal existence. Kind of the traditional way that Fae are presented, as stealing you for a party and stealing all your years, and then letting you come back to turn to dust. Tinged with some of the darkness that comes from storms as well, the sense of drowning or being overwhelmed by experience. Drought Fae, on the other hand, might use the party as a tool. Being away with the fairies here sees a person plied with the fires of passion, yes. Heavy music and intoxicating aromas, all the while the mortal itself is the food. Unbeknownst to the taken mortal, the party only exists for them, powered by them, their very essence, and so the one night they spend at this party is genuinely just one night. It's not some trick of Fae time. But this one day of partying sees the Drought Fae draining their participant of life, energy and vitality in the doing. Next, the stealing of names. Drought Fae may wish to strip names from mortals in the traditional sense that Fae like to do this time, to gain power over them as parts of deals, bargains, and the name magic that Fae are known for, while Storm Fae here might be the untraditional ones, taking names not as a method of control, of dominance, but in a desperate search for novelty. Storm Fae crave change and newness, and so each name they can collect is a new identity, a new way to engage with the world, where Drought Fae may keep a ledger of indentured mortals. A Storm Fae may have instead a room of costumes, trinkets and possessions from people that they have taken them from, to be someone else at a moment's notice. All the while, the victim feels as if they've been put through a washing machine and coming out dizzy, disorientated, and amnesic in certain ways. We're on a roll, so next we're going to tackle why is it so bad to eat Fae food. Well, for our Drought Fae, it's fairly obvious. It's because food is rare, it's sacred, and all of it has been carefully preserved. Or stolen from the Storm Fae. To Drought Fae, moisture and food are so valuable to them. To steal it is a legitimate crime and also personal insult. In practical terms, most Drought Fae food will be dry, salted meats, magically preserved hydration globules, or dried fruits, and thieves of these must be punished, perhaps themselves becoming the salted meats, bone broths and blood bags to give back to the Drought Fae after their egregious violation of stealing their food and sustenance. This time, it's the Storm Fae's turn to be slightly more traditional in their response to Fae food. Ripe, juicy berries, magically seasoned cupcakes, all packed with flavour and fairy dust. But eating the food of the storm will change your body. You will partake of the chaos and wild essence of the Fae. You belong there now, craving, seeking constant stimulus and novelty that can't be found really in the doldrums of everyday mortal life, in the material world. Basically, Storm Fae food is going to give you extreme ADHD. Our last classic Fae trope is the stealing of babies and replacing of those babies with Fae cuckoos, changelings. It's now our drought phase turn to be traditional here again. They crave sustenance, moisture, and food. And their fae folks suffer the hunger of drought. So the obvious thing to do is to send a hungry changeling to replace a baby, so that said changeling can eat of the food of mortals, while the fae back home feast on that little baby. It's monstrous, it's horrifying, but that's the fae of folklore. And besides, they're hungry and the parents won't even notice. For the storm fae though, taking a child is a rescue mission. Life is dull and drab and grey, and babies don't deserve to grow up in a world of work. Steal them while they're still young and innocent. Feed them the food of the storm and let them be free and experience everything there is to experience. That's the right thing to do. As for that changeling that's left behind in their place, well, they're either being punished, sent to be away from the fae for some past transgression in the capricious meanness of the storm lords, or if the storm fae are feeling particularly generous, that changeling is there as a gift to the mortals, left to that family to bring interest, novelty, stories, and wondrous fae trickery to that drab overworld of work and money and peasants. Those same actions, those traditional motifs of fae behaviour with distinctive courtly implications and thought processes. Not every fae is going to be a die-hard member of a court. Not every activity must be justified by court philosophy. But to be able to split the motivations of our seelie and unseelie fae fairly evenly across the two courts of rainy season and dry season, I think is more effective than buying into that simple moral binary. All fae can do evil, all fae can desire or intend to do good. And that is just something that is not shown so well by the simple binary system that we've stuck with so far. So try my system out, see what other non-obvious associations there are. And I hope now you consider more what the fae might look like outside of their normal seasonal courts or that normal classic binary. But with all that said, I've been Tom, otherwise known as the Grungeon Master. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.